Hi, my name's Greg Jameson with Web Stores Limited. I'm here with my colleague today.
I'm Jason Balakier. I am the sales manager for Executech. We are a 25-year security-focused IT company. We specialize in managing the IT and security for small to medium-sized companies.
Yeah, and so Jason and I actually met at a Chamber of Commerce event and started talking about things that we were interested in. And obviously, technology was a common theme between us. We decided that we should actually put together a video for you that where we discussed some of the things, he was talking about being a security company. Web Stores is obviously an e-commerce company, and specifically where those two overlap. What kind of security measures do people need to take when they're working online and when they're either selling or buying from an online store? So we have no agenda today. Jason and I are just talking, figuring that there's going to be some good tidbits that come out of this that I think are going to be beneficial to anyone that has an online presence.
We are talking shop, so to speak.
Yep. So a couple of gearheads here that just decided that maybe we had something to offer. And,
That's right.
it was interesting. I was actually reading a blog post this morning by someone else that was talking about two-factor authentication and how it really annoys people that they have to have this second layer of protection when they've already got these big, long, secure passwords that, over the years, we started out with things like the name of your pet is your password, or password 123 or whatever. And then it became where obviously hackers were able to determine those passwords pretty easily and get into your accounts. So then it became, okay, now we need to have at least 8 characters and then 12 characters, and now 16 characters long, and they have to include both letters and special characters. And so we come up with all these creative passwords that we can remember. And if you're like me, you've got hundreds of passwords and you can't remember them all, so you store them in a password manager. So now you have to go into your password manager, retrieve this long, complicated password, plug it in when you want to log into a website. And then on top of that, they want you to have this two-factor authentication. And it's a real annoyance. So what are your thoughts, Jason?
Yeah, great question. It's one that's been posed, countless times, from interested parties as well as reluctant parties, in the same vein. And to your point, MFA or 2FA, however you want to refer to it as, even referring to any kind of online commerce or e-commerce site, is a baseline fundamental that you have to have nowadays. So having strong passwords, MFA or 2FA, and access management are part of that. And to your point, I think that while security and cybersecurity as a whole, there seems to be, I don't want to say disconnect, but there is a fundamental overlap or kind of blockage, if you will, with the way operational efficiency works, right? So with IT, you can almost kind of pinpoint where IT steps in to increase operational efficiency, right? Systems communicating, nothing shutting down, no one getting blocked, etc. Whereas cybersecurity inherently by design is supposed to stop that operational efficiency for security purposes, right? So there is pushback generally from people that will say, hey, it's too much. I just want to get to my daily operation. And I think that does, at a higher level, cause gaps or soft spots because people will kind of relax some of their security so they can operate more efficiently. Whereas if it's done and positioned correctly, it shouldn't be that much of an impediment to what you're doing. And to your point, I see pushback getting less and less and less with MFA, Greg. I think that's, 2, 3, 4 years ago, you would get a ton of pushback, even maybe sooner than that. But now MFA is required with damn near everything. So if you go into your bank, your mortgage company, anything that you're really required to do, MFA is one of those things where it's table stakes to be done. So I think with the ongoing kind of natural kind of progression of how often it's adapted now or how it's required now with what we do, the day-to-day impediment I think becomes a little bit less. Also, opening up people to the idea of why we have security, which leads to a bigger conversation. But to your point, yes and no, a little bit, just in terms of what I've seen with kind of the pushback around MFA.
You know what I think is the frustrating part about it is that basically you have to have two devices. You're working on your laptop. You and I, for example, are on computers right now, but if I try logging into a site, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I've got to have my cell phone with me too. And maybe I left my cell phone in the other room, or it's just kind of this thing of now I have to have two devices. But
Yeah.
I totally believe in multi-factor authentication. If you are running an online store and you don't have two-factor authentication set up to log into the back end of your website, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. I actually have a client that just about a week ago, she had her website hacked into, and it absolutely, she got the white screen of death when she went to her website. I went into her hosting company. They didn't have automatic backups turned on. And she hadn't been paying attention to this. It had actually been like 2 weeks since she had been to her website. So there was nothing left of her website. Now, fortunately, I had made a backup, and I tend to do this for my clients. I make backups and keep a copy myself. Now, it doesn't include, all the latest orders and maybe any changes that they've made, but at least at the time that I start working with them or the time that we make any major changes to their site, I keep a backup locally, specifically so that when things like that happen, we can do a restore, which is what we had to do. If she had had two-factor authentication turned on, if she had had automatic backups turned on, she would have saved herself a whole bunch of headache and probably some money.
Yeah. Operational, anytime downtime is the big one, right? Whether you're e-commerce or a brick and mortar location, I think that people tend to just think of security in general as when a bad actor or malactor, or however you want to refer to them, something happens and there's a breach, they're more concerned about, what is the ongoing rate, if you will, the extortion rate. We want 50K to give you back your information, and kind of what that looks like. But the real issue is when they do attack and get through and they shut you down, that amount of time is mass critical for a business. And that's what people don't really understand is when companies are attacked, and the reason that so many go out of business so quickly isn't because of the attack itself, it's the aftermath, right? It's the amount of time that they're down. So studies have shown, FBI reports have shown, what that looks like and how often, how much the average cost is. For e-commerce is maybe a little different. I'm sure it is. But for small businesses in general, that amount of time is hypercritical to that. And people kind of tend to forget that. So your last lines of defense, with security are going to be your backups, like you just mentioned, right? Making sure you have that, and then your disaster recovery, right? So I always try to tell clients or get away from technology jargon a little bit. What is a backup? What does a disaster recovery do? And I use a sports analogy, and I tell them, look, if we look at it like we're playing defense on football, you'll have all these cyber tools that you're using to kind of proactively attack, right? Like a defensive lineman or an edge rusher getting to the quarterback to sack them. But if their quarterback, i.e., the bad actor, throws a deep pass and the receiver catches it, the two last people, the lines of defense, right, is going to be your secondary. So maybe a linebacker, you could say, would be considered kind of your backup, right? And then your last line of defense is your safety. So it sounds kind of silly, but if you kind of use those terms, it helps people kind of understand it better a little bit. But yeah, having backup and disaster recovery are hypercritical to saving your business, whether e-commerce or otherwise.
Yeah, you using that football analogy, for those that are not aware, both Jason and I are in Colorado, and the Broncos had this incredible defensive play last week where it was a 100-yard pick six, and the head coach of the Broncos was saying that wasn't a 7-point play, that was a 10-point play,
Right.
because it prevented the field goal getting kicked as well as him scoring. And that's really kind of the same thing as what we're talking about here. It's not just a question of, how many sales did I lose because my website got hacked? It's a question of also what else did you prevent, or including your online integrity? If people think that your website is vulnerable, then you're losing some credibility as well as losing sales.
100%. There's a domino effect when something like that happens. Integrity is a big part of that as well. 100%.
Yeah. So, WordPress is by far the most popular content management platform out there for building websites right now. And I've had people tell me, that they don't like WordPress because so many people hack into it. Now, the reason why people hack into WordPress is, well, there's a couple of things you can do to prevent it, but the primary reason why is because it's so popular. If you had an unpopular platform, people wouldn't bother trying to figure out how to hack into it. So the fact that it is popular is the reason why WordPress websites tend to have this reputation that they can be hacked into. It's because that's where all the effort is going in terms of trying to hack into things. Now, the way that you can prevent people from hacking into your website is only use plugins that are good, solid plugins to begin with, that don't have any leaks in them. And in fact, this is another one of those annoyance things, kind of like two-factor authentication, is that when you have a WordPress website, they want you to update the plugins. It seems like all the time. Every time you log into your dashboard, it's like, you've got 6 plugins that need to be updated. The fact is you should update those plugins, because what they're usually doing is they have found places where people can hack into your website, and they're patching those holes. So whether you have a WordPress website or any other kind of a website, I don't care if you have a Shopify website, where they try to say that, it's more hack proof because of the fact that it's a closed platform type thing. It's kind of like the difference between Apples and PCs, I guess. Apple says that they're more secure because it's a closed system. The reality is, and Jason and I both know this, even if people watching this may not know it, is you can hack into anything. I don't care if you do have a Mac, you can hack into it. It's not immune from the hackers. The important thing is, in this whole discussion, is keep all of your software up to date. Up-to-date software tends to be more difficult for hackers to break into.
Yeah, and to that point, to elaborate on that too, Greg, I mean, in an industry like cybersecurity, it's not bulletproof. So guaranteeing anything is a falsehood. The reality is that technology, the way it's advancing, is that, I hate to say that we're playing catch up, but the amount of catch up the amount of technology that's advancing within the industry on the bad actors or the malactor side is something we're trying to always counteract, so, in a lot of ways, it's we're living in a world where it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So to your point, a security posture is really critical. What those policies look like, how you're responding to them, but creating that security posture for yourself as a large entity or a small one, you kind of have to set up your own standard operating procedure and SOP around that. With the website thing, and even going back to our previous point of, when you lose that integrity from your clients, that will affect your business when you have downtime, right? Offsite data center storage would be another way that they could maybe circumvent that a little bit, with the standards that they have on the cybersecurity side, that can help facilitate more trusts, and kind of having that from your clients. Another thing too is, we strongly advise in secure websites. So anything HTTPS would be our recommendation to use, in the e-commerce worlds. There's a certain safety and certainty, kind of a catch-all or safety net, if you will, for clients that can breed a little bit more trust within a business. So I definitely recommend looking into what that might look like with HTTPS websites. To Greg's point, hackers are always constantly poking and prodding. So whether it's WordPress or anything else they're using, whether it's through human manipulation or AI or a combination of both, to be honest with you, they're always poking and looking for soft spots in websites or ways to get in. So for companies that are having phishing issues or spear phishing issues, which are targeting a very specific person, it's regardless, it's all kind of doing the same thing. They're looking for soft spots where they can attack and get in. And that's what they're looking for. So having everything up to date and having a secure site are definitely recommendations that I would adhere to, follow, and employ.
Yeah, you were talking about HTTPS. One of the things that I learned several years ago, and you can either say that, yeah, that's right, or no, you're off base on this. I'm always open to learning too, but I had heard that the difference between a cheap or even free SSL certificate and one that costs you several $100s a month, that the technology is exactly the same in terms of the amount of protection that it gives you. The primary difference is in the amount of insurance that's attached to that SSL certificate. So if you're paying several $100s a month for an SSL certificate, the company that issued that certificate is basically backing you up on that, as opposed to if you're getting a free or a cheap one, it may be that you're not really getting any protection other than the physical protection of having the SSL certificate in the first place.
And that's a great point. And I might even defer right back to you, answer a question with a question on you, Greg. But I think that I look at it more so from risk mitigation. And the one thing that I know with the secure sites, it's, how data is transferred between user and server, and that's to do with encryption, right? So just to paint an easier picture, if the protocol and what you're using, anything online is open to the public in general, right? Just kind of use it like that, where, if you're driving in a car, you're passing by everyone in traffic. But with the encryption protocol to securely transfer those things, that's you're disclosing that from public view. So quite literally, you're transporting that information, almost teleporting, to use a sci-fi term. So it's going just from one to the other without going through the traffic, if that makes sense. So you might be right, and there may not be a lot of variance. It might be one of those kind of industry things where it's like you have to use an expensive one versus you may not have to. But from an encryption standpoint, that's kind of how I look at it, and how well it's encrypted, I think, is the most important point. So whatever information you find around that, and whatever they're securing or claiming securing through encryption protocol, I think is the focal point.
Yeah, it's kind of like I guess an inexpensive car versus a luxury car. They both get you to the same place.
Yeah, and some of these, more affordable cars, these Hyundais, what comes standard are pretty nice. These Kias and Hyundais are, they're kind of like Lexuses a little bit, right? You don't have to pay as much like you used to, but some of it might be prestige, might be just name recognition and comfort in that. So maybe those SSLs might carry a little bit more, weight, in that perspective, kind of in that world, in that vertical, if that makes sense. But maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah. So one of the things, we started out talking about multi-factor authentication, how it's kind of a hassle for people. And then we've talked about some of these other hassles, I guess, that it seems like starting a website today seems like it is a whole lot more difficult than it was 10 or 15 years ago. 10 or 15 years ago, you threw up a website and all was good. And now you've got, besides all these security things that we've talked about, you've got things out there like you have to conform to different privacy acts, whether it be in Europe, California. Colorado's got one of the stronger privacy acts that you have to conform to. You have to conform to being ADA compliant. If people are not, blind people can't use a screen reader on your website, or deaf people can't hear you if you have a video up there, and so forth. And it's like this constant stream of software add-ons that you have to get your website up and be legally compliant on everything. And like I said, it's so hard to start a website today compared to 10 years ago. It's a hassle.
I mean, yes, it really is. There's no way around it. I think the other thing to consider is maybe the biggest one that I would think, and I think that, the framework of PCI, especially with e-commerce, any kind of payments or sensitive data transferred online is a big one. So making sure that your website is PCI compliant is really critical. That by itself is a laundry list of compliance things and protocols that you need to abide by, whether that's, how you protect stored data or testing systems regularly. I mean, there's a plethora of things to adhere to for just PCI in general. But whether you're an on-site e-commerce site only, PCI compliance is hypercritical. But also, in the brick and mortar world where there's contractors and they have little tablets, and if you're a carpenter or electrician and you pay anything to your tablet, not to your headquarters or your home base, you need PCI compliance there too. So there's applications around that, but PCI in general is a huge framework from a website standpoint that you have to make sure that you are monitoring and doing properly and adhering to stringently. It's a very big deal.
Yeah, and if you aren't following it, the major bank cards like Visa and MasterCard, they'll shut you down.
They don't play.
No.
Yeah, that's a lifeline of
It's pretty
business.
black and white for them.
100%. Yeah, and so they look at it just from a strictly, like you said, black and white. It is or it isn't. There's no gray area, so there's no really messing around, and all that stuff is kind of scary. But to your point, it takes a lot more to starting overnight is something that I don't know. Technically, it might be a reality. You probably would know more than I would on that, Greg. But I think there's a lot more hurdles to do it properly, for sure.
Yeah, you've got all these simple website builders out there now that has made it so that all these teenagers in high school and stuff are like, yeah, I can build you a website for a couple $100, but you really need to be careful of that. It may even look good because this website builder makes it so easy for them to build graphically pleasing pages. But by the time you put all these other factors in there, you have to make the determination of, hey, is it really worth that to me? Or since this is my business, do I want to make sure that I've got all the I's dotted and T's crossed?
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough, and it also depends on how you scale, right? So you have to keep in mind what your business plan would be or what that model looks like. Year one will look far different than year 2, year 3, and then year 5, year 10. So just like any other business, but knowing where to start, what your foundation is super important, because it's easier to go in and kind of fix some of those gaps, as opposed to if you are lax and have massive vulnerabilities on year 3 that you didn't build out in year 1 through building out a proper protocol or process or foundation or a posture, all kind of referring to the same thing with your security or your business model, then you will be paying exponentially far more than you would if you just would have done it properly and set yourself up, as you built and as you scale your business. People don't think about pen tests. Pen testing is a big one that you may not think about year 1, but if you are doing a lot of money, and the way that PCI works essentially, and kind of all the compliance stuff, not to get too boring or in the weeds, but the more let's say if you do $1 million of business, level 1, level 2, level 3, right? There's more complexities to what PCI compliance you need to be adhering to, and what your posture should be and look like. And part of those things, if you are a big e-commerce site and you're doing a lot of business in the millions of dollars, you're going to want a pen test. And essentially what a pen test is, for those that don't know, it's basically you're paying someone to essentially hack your site, hack your business. And they would call that a white hat hacker, where they're not doing it for nefarious purposes like the bad actors do, but you're paying someone to look at all the holes and how they can get in to prevent those things. So you're paying them to quite literally hack into your company, and you pay them money to do this. You pay a lot.
Yeah.
So, but that might be something you might have to consider from an expenditure standpoint in year 3, or as you could scale your business that you didn't think about in year 1. Those things need to be all present and considered as you're going to biz.
Yeah, you talking about that made me think of a couple of things. One is, if you are a business that's doing $1 million a year or so in online sales, well, first of all, congratulations, because not many people get to that point.
You're doing great.
Yeah, you're doing good, but that brings up a whole bunch of other problems that you are going to have too. One of which is taxes. When e-commerce first came out, you could sell stuff to anybody that you wanted to everywhere and not have to worry about taxes. Obviously, that is no longer the case. And in part, we can blame Amazon for this and their success. But Quill Corporation basically got sued in, I think it was South Dakota, for not paying online taxes in that state. And the court rulings basically now are that any state can collect taxes on internet sales. So the whole thing of where it used to be like catalog sales, and if you were in a different state, you didn't have to collect sales taxes in that state. That's no longer the case. If I sell a product in a different state, I may or may not have to collect taxes in that other state, and every single state is different. The general rule is that if you're selling $100,000 worth of goods into another state, you have to collect taxes in that state. If I only sell, a $20 product into Kansas, Kansas isn't going to come after me that I didn't collect sales tax on that. Yeah. But if I sell $100,000 worth of stuff into Kansas, they want their money. And so that's
right, goes right to their state economy, of course. Yeah, it makes sense.
It's another one of these hassles that you have to deal with as you're doing business online. The other thing that I was thinking as you were talking is various contact forms. Contact forms are a great way for hackers to get into your website. Now, you can put up a what's called a reCAPTCHA, and I don't even remember what that big long acronym stands for, but it basically is the thing that proves that you're a human and not a bot. Some of them are check boxes, some of them you have to match a certain character string that's displayed, other ones it's all done behind the scenes. But any kind of a form that you have on your website, you want to make sure that you have a reCAPTCHA attached to that form. And even if you do, the other thing that you have to be really careful of with forms is when you have these free form elements where you can like type in a paragraph or whatever, you need to make sure that those are locked down to where people are not capable of injecting SQL code into your website. If they can copy and paste code into your forms, they can bring your website down. And as we've talked about, your whole business.
Sorry. Yeah, these considerations are massive. I know that this is something that's a part of your methodology, Greg, with your clients. And do you have, dare I say, a handbook, for your clients that you give them on security or anything thereof when they're creating, when they become clients of yours?
Yeah, that it's a good idea. I tend to do it myself rather than putting the onus on them. It's like, hey, when I build out your website, I'm gonna incorporate these things, but having a handbook for them to refer back to is not a bad idea. I do
Yeah.
have, I don't even see it up behind me right now. Oh yeah, here it is over here on this side. I do have this book called Cyber Wars that is a novel basically about uh, an entrepreneur that has an e-commerce website and how they go through all these hassles of one after another of being attacked and what to do about it and how they mitigate it and so forth. But yeah, a handbook is actually a great idea.
Yeah, something that might be handy. And again, something that might require updating, as technology continues to change. It might be a can of worms. You might have a handbook every 6 months, at the rate that we're going in this world. But yeah, that might be something to think about for clients, but something they can leverage and, familiarize themselves with. I think education is something that's now table stakes as a business owner, whether it's e-com or anything else that you're doing. I work with largely a lot of blue collar companies in my world, and they're not very tech savvy. And I think there's a lot of pushback because technology can be scary. So as I've mentioned to you, in our conversations, I look at technology in general, whether it's e-com or a retail brick and mortar or whatever, multi-million-dollar business. I think that education is in cybersecurity in general, as a whole, it's a top-down issue. So you'll have corporations, whether it's e-com or otherwise, that the CEO doesn't look upon security as something that's anything but a cost center, right? Something that costs them money. They're not looking at it as a differentiator for their business. They're not looking at it from a strategic point of view to position themselves, which they should be. If you have a CEO or your CISO or your CTO or CIO don't report directly to the CEO, generally there's a disconnect, right? they don't have that direct line of, hey, this is something that's critical, and handbooks for your clients. I think C-level and CEOs should have cybersecurity handbooks too. I think that this is something that's looked upon with a general stigma where it's, it just costs me money. It's a thing. It's like, no, like this is the way the world works. I didn't want my kids before I had them to have tablets or be on their phones. I used to low-key judge other people pre-parenting, but now that I have kids, guess what? If you take that technology away from them, you're prohibiting them from living in the digital world. And with that said, I don't want them on Facebook or social media or whatever your parameters are, but to prevent that notion that, hey, this doesn't affect my business is foolish. And it will bite you because it's a matter of time. Like we talked about, this world is a matter of when and not if. So that shift in mindset, I think, starts at the top. But yeah, we really need to educate ourselves on why, I guess is my point. Education can run the gamut from top to bottom.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, it changes all the time. You were talking about that with, if I put out a handbook to give to my clients, I actually, I teach this course to show people how to use AI in their business. And I had this book that I put out, called the AI Product Playbook, physical book. And it's like, it changes so fast that I use this in my first course, and by the time I taught the second course, it was worthless. And so I was like, okay, this has to be a digital thing that gets updated all the time. Because all of these things, as we said, 10 years ago, it was easy. Now it's not easy. As Jason said, you are going to get hacked. And it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And what mitigation measures do you have in place for when it does happen? What disaster plans do you have in place so that when it happens, it just becomes a minor annoyance instead of bringing down your business?
Yeah, in this world, and again, tech jargon, runs rampant. But kind of the cool phrase these days for cybersecurity, and a holistic approach, a 360 approach, if you will, is known as a left of boom and a right of boom strategy. And quite literally, what does that mean? For those not in the industry, it's left of boom is all preventative measures, preventative strategy, what you can do to prevent the attack as much as you can. To Greg's point, it's going to happen, but what can you do to prevent that as much as possible? Right of boom strategy is your recovery strategy, your recovery measures. So a backup, like we referred to before, backup and disaster recovery are right of boom because the attack or breach has happened. What do we do to prevent downtime, or how do we recoup our data? How do we get back online? So disaster recovery is how do we get back to working at operational efficiency, before the attack happens. So that left of boom and right of boom strategy is essentially a cool way of saying, a holistic approach to security in general.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Hey, I want to shift just a little bit. Mentioned AI a couple of times in here today, and it's obviously in the last couple of years has been a big thing. All over the news, everybody's using it today to generate content and a whole bunch of other stuff. But the hackers are using AI too. What do you see as different ways that hackers are using AI to get into your sites in the first place, or what can business owners do using AI to help counter these attacks?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that's loaded. And to be honest with you, I don't know all the answers. If I did,
None of us
I'd be a lot
do.
richer. I'd be a lot richer than I am right now. Okay, I think that at the end of the day, it's just a matter of sophistication. So, as things have gone, especially within e-commerce, I think that phishing attacks and ransomware, just like in a brick and mortar location, typically are what you have to look at most often. And some of that's from human error, right? And 80-90%, you've heard the term or the percentage, but it's high. As high as 95%, I've read, who knows? Of human error, of your own employees clicking on something that they shouldn't be, or yourself clicking on something that you shouldn't be from a phishing attack. If you can implement, better ways, do phishing tools. So education around that are going to be, user education, so having these things where awareness training, things like that. And so essentially what I mean by that is these phishing attacks are getting more sophisticated, where it used to look like an email that looked pretty noticeable, like a prince from Africa requiring $50 million that you've won. Everyone's knows that one is kind of the origin story of a phishing attack. They've come a long way from that. So now they're far more sophisticated, where they look like they're coming from your boss, or they're coming from someone. The email address isn't as different looking. It's, the logo, everything looks way more in line and apt for you to click on, quite literally. So from that standpoint, the sophistication level is getting better and better every day. Any ransomware attacks that if you do click on something that triggers the white screen of death, or the ransomware essentially is extortion, right? Give us X number of dollars so you can get back your sensitive data as well as your client sensitive data or whatever sensitive data there might be. So those are things to be kind of cognizant of and aware of. And what they're doing is doing more terms. You've seen this, and it's gone to spoofing, right? Where there's phone calls that you're getting. They're using that data. So looking at phone calls, and you've heard these that are coming from banks. U.S. Bank was spoofed and was sending out their security number that looked just like the one on the back of their card saying there's a fraud issue. So those things are happening, and this is all kind of piggybacking off of the online thing, everything that's happening through data breaches. So the ones are video, and the use of AI and deep fakes. You've now heard it, especially now we're in the political world, especially with the election year and how much AI is affecting global elections. But deep fakes are now becoming more realistic. So what that might look like is people literally calling you and seeing you, and it looks like them. It sounds like your boss. It looks like your boss, and then it's not really your boss. So all these things pertain both online and in general technology with what they're doing. Another one is scary enough. Everything is a service nowadays. So if I had a story, and I may have told you this one, Greg, but there was a disgruntled employee that was, the third hire in the company, was a higher up, and there's a massive disagreement within the company, and that person got let go. That person was not happy about how they were let go or what they lost within that compensation plan or whatever they were given. And quite simply, they went to the dark web, and within 10 minutes, they found a bad actor, and they said, "Hey, man, look, I want 25% of everything you take, but I'll give you the keys to the castle." So access and ransomware as a service, I guess, would it be considered or called? I don't know if that's a technical term, but you can find ransomware as a service on the dark web now pretty quickly. So these are new things that are coming out, and there's more and more. I'm attending a conference at the end of the month for the newest cybersecurity scams and what they're doing. So I'm sure I'll hear something that I haven't heard yet. It's wild. It's crazy.
Yeah, you saying all that remind me of two things. One, I tend to hang out with a pretty technically savvy crowd. Most of my friends are geeks like Jason and I are. And we still get fall for some of these phishing schemes too. I had one friend that lost a couple $1,000s in a phishing scheme because somebody was impersonating their bank. And I know that fairly recently, within the last few months, I clicked on an ad for something that I wanted. I don't even remember what it was, but it was like, this looks really cool. I want to get this. I clicked on the ad, and it was a phishing scheme, basically. And they almost got me, on some of this stuff. But when I clicked on the thing and they started asking for some information and stuff, I was like, this doesn't smell quite right. But it was like, this is an ad, for crying out loud. It wasn't even an email. And I've seen other ones where you were talking about banks where they can just change one character in a name so that it still looks like it's spelled correctly, but maybe they're using the Cyrillic alphabet for that one character instead of the Latin alphabet. So Bank of America, it still looks like Bank of America, but the lowercase a may be just a little bit different, and you would never notice it because they're such sneaky SOBs.
They are. Yeah. I mean, it's widespread. I think, as I mentioned, there's the whole issues that are going on. I mean, even outside of our world, I mean, if you've read or if you've seen anything that's going on with FEMA and the FEMA scams with the hurricanes, with Hurricane Helene, excuse me, and with Milton, I believe, is the next one that's going to be hitting. But there's been huge issues with phishing domains, malicious files that are disguised as FEMA documents, scammers that are posing as FEMA assistance providers, and it's been a huge pollution and issue for hurricane relief. And that's topical. That's happening right now. That's terrifying and that sucks. And why is that happening? And because it's just a matter of vulnerability and people that can strike, and that's the opportunity they look for. And there's some bad people out there, but there's also good people. But that's something that's even real life applications in the bad sense. It's happening right now with the hurricane stuff in America. So
Yeah, there's more good people in the world than bad people, fortunately.
that's right. Yeah,
But
I believe.
What I want to kind of do to wrap this up is, if you've watched this whole thing and we've scared you enough to say, oh man, I really need to be paying more attention to this, I want to encourage you to get a hold of Jason and or myself, or both of us. If either of us or both of us can help you in any way, we would love to do that. You can schedule a call with me by going to my Calendly link. It's just calendly.ly/Greg Jameson. And we can schedule a call. And Jason, you want to give them how they can stay in touch with you?
Yeah, of course. I appreciate that. I'm big on education, so whatever I can do to help get you the information you need. I'm not here to sell anybody. I know what I know, and if I don't know, I'd rather tell you the things that I can and guide you in the right direction, because I know people that might know. So from a tech resource standpoint, I'm happy to do that for you. Any questions you might have, it's my first and last name, jason.balakier@executech.com, jason.balakier@executech.com, and my direct number is 720-308-2033. That's my line. Call me, text me, don't spoof me or hack me. But yeah, feel free to reach out, text me, call me, whatever works best for you. I promise to try to make this as non-techy as possible, and not to scare you in any way, but to give you the information you might need. So happy to be a resource.
Yeah, and if you're a hacker, you now have Jason's email, so you can send him a phishing scam. And
you can if you want to. Yeah, good luck getting in, but yeah, sure, go ahead. I do work for a security company, but knock yourself out.
Hey, this has been a lot of fun. Like we said, reach out to us. We'd be happy to help. And hopefully you got some value out of this video today.
Yeah, Greg, thanks for having me, and appreciate you having me on, and look forward to future conversations.